Just to rest in your presence. Breathe in the atmosphere of heaven. And exhale it into the earth. Just to bring in the presence into this place. You are a portal that brings heaven to earth. And the Holy Spirit that lives within you is the connector between heaven and earth. And you are a gate. Father, I just pray that as each one of us are breathing in the atmosphere of heaven, and we exhale into this earth, that earth begins to look a lot more like heaven. And especially in this place. Wow. Yeah, you can get an energy boost as you feel heaven coming through you into the earth. Whew. Hallelujah. Thank you, Father. Thank you. Thank you, Reed. Love it. Thank you so much.
We just again want to welcome you. I am just so delighted to see so many of your bright and shiny faces. And I know that as we are getting more and more free, those shiny faces are going to get even brighter with the glory of the Lord. Many of you we know, but some of you we don't. And so we're looking forward in the next couple days to get to know you much more. And so I just want to thank you so much for being here. It was a couple of weeks ago, and of all of our conferences, this is probably one of the ones that we've had the most difficulty getting a venue, getting everything worked out. And a couple of weeks ago, we were like, nobody signed up. Are we really going to do this? And so I'm just so pleased and so grateful to the Lord for the hunger that you have shown by coming here and being here today. And I know that Father is going to bless you abundantly.
And so you'll find on the back table some cards, and I encourage you to pick some up if you want to know anything more about Kingdom Equip, considering what we're doing. We have quite a few things going on. How many of you are aware of Ultimate Impact? Awesome. And how many of you are actually in or have gone through Ultimate Impact? Sweet. Very cool. Well, share with somebody around you what it's like. Not now, but later on. Anyway, there's several things that we're doing, and Ultimate Impact is one of our sweet spots that we really are encouraging people to get into because it teaches something that we encourage people to step into. I'm just going to keep it at that. Anyway, we are absolutely delighted to have Elena here with us from England, and I'm going to let Adina introduce her.
Yes, it's such a delight to have her here. And we got to, I don't even know how we connected through Kingdom Talks, but the cool thing was as we got to talking, we realized that we had more in common than we knew. Elena grew up a Seventh-day Adventist just like me. And so we've been able to share that journey, and it's been awesome. And so when they did the Kingdom Talks interview and talked about the Liebusters and all that they had going, they offered us a free session. And we've been through all kinds of different inner healing models in the past, but this has been so powerful in our lives. And I haven't even told you, recently had a huge breakthrough that was related to what we did a couple months ago. And so I know you're in for an awesome treat. And so welcome, Elena.
I'll just hook up my computer to the phone and then I'll be ready. This is so cool. I've got my English phone here, and I've just paired it to run on my laptop. I think that's really cool. So, I like that we're sitting in sofas, and this is a very sort of informal atmosphere here, because Liebusters is all about family. I think people get wounded in families, and I think that people should be healed in families. I think that's God's plan. So it's really great to have you all here sitting in the family living room. One of the things we do that we like to do is talk, and we like to share our stories. But when we're in Papa's family and we talk, there's always a meaning and a purpose to the talking. And so I really feel that at the end of our time together tonight, that Papa's saying, let's have some activation. So I'm just really looking forward to that. And so we're just going to be very simple tonight. I'm just going to be sharing 3 things with you, really. And then I'm going to talk to you about our subject, which is hunger. And then I'm going to be talking about the Liebuster process. So let's just begin with a word of prayer, shall we? If you could close your eyes, please. I kind of am wired to see things through metaphor, and I'm always looking for the meaning in what I see. And if I don't see meaning and I just see beauty, I just try to write that down. But there's something about being present and being connected and being in the moment that has always been very, very special for me. So, when I was 12, I wrote a poem in school, and my teacher thought it was great, so he had me send it in, and my first poem was published when I was 12. And then when I hit the teen years, about 13 and 14, I started watching television. And I remember the year that I was 13 to 14. It was the year of MacGyver. Do you remember MacGyver? I loved MacGyver. He was so clever and good with his hands, and he just had the materials right there every time. And he could do the job. And he was so, I still get a feeling about MacGyver. And at the end of that MacGyver year, as I kind of looked over the survey of my life, I thought, wow, you know, what do I have to show for this year? And it was like, well, MacGyver. And I just kind of made a decision that I was going to stop watching television, because I'd spent all that time watching television, but I had nothing to show for it at the end of the year. So at the age of 14, I started taking piano lessons, and I stopped watching television, and that's when I began to write music. And I think that for me, it was definitely about a language and an outlet and a place where I could find myself. So, you know, 20 years later when I was teaching piano, I would always start people putting their hands on the keyboard and making a friendship with the whole of the keyboard, the up, the down, the black, the white, you know, getting very comfortable with the keyboard and finding their own sound, because I believed that the sound was in the person. Music wasn't about something you put in front of them and that they had to play, but actually music was about giving people a vocabulary to then find their own kind of language. So I kind of spent my high school years playing in the band and just making up my own songs. And at that time, nobody told me that being a composer was an option. I didn't know you could be a composer when you grew up. I just made up my own music. And so I finished high school and I went on to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just signed up for all the music lessons. And one of my music theory teachers came to me one day and said, Elena, I think you should go and talk to the composition department. And I said, composition department? What's that? And so he sent me along to the composition department, but I was too scared. It was very scary for me. The thought of it was very frightening. So, fear can block us from our destiny. So if you feel afraid of something, it's really important to stop and grab hold of that fear and listen to what it's saying, because sometimes it's speaking destiny, sometimes fear is an arrow. So it took me about a quarter and a half to summon up the courage to go and knock on the door of the composition professor's department, and he opened the door, and he was just lovely kind of teddy bear of a fella. And he's like, come on in and sit down at the piano. And so he said, tell me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I have music in my dreams at night, and I would just really like to, I just would really like to play. And I'd like to be able to learn how to take what's in my head out. And he said, okay, well, show me some of the stuff that you're doing. So I sat at the piano, and I kind of showed him some of the stuff that I was doing. And he kind of sat me at a chair, and he looked at me, and he said, you're a composer. Would you like to do a composition degree? And no one had ever said that to me before. I didn't even know it was an option. And so I said, yes. So in that very moment, I became a composition major, and my whole life kind of started. So as a composer, again, one is wired a little differently, because a composer can be a performer, but I wasn't a performer. I was a composer. So that meant that my job was to take what I was imagining, what I was feeling and sensing, and be able to somehow put it on a piece of paper that I could hand to somebody else that they could interpret and play. And so a journey began. And it's been an incredible journey, and I feel very honored to have been on the journey that I have been. But as I said to you, it's been a long way to come to be standing in front of you here today. So when I was a composer at Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington, that was my hometown, I met Jonathan. And I'd love to tell you the love story between Jonathan and I think we're going to be coming back another time, and I'd like to share that with you, because it's not a very typical story. But I met and married Jonathan, and within 9 months, we moved to England, and that was, 24 years ago. We had our 25th anniversary in November. So we moved to England, and I've been living there ever since. So I'm now transatlantic. So my accent is a transatlantic accent, and I'm sorry. It's just where I've landed. And so we have an 18-year-old son named Nathan, and we have a daughter who's 15 and a half. And so Jonathan couldn't be here today because in England the school year goes longer, and the children are still in school in July. So our daughter finishes school tomorrow. So again, when we come back, hopefully we'll be here together. So about 4 years ago, I guess I was teaching piano, I was writing music to commission, I was helping Jonathan in a software company, and that was my life. And 4 years ago, Jonathan, 5 years ago now really, he was taking a group of people into London for a spirit-filled sort of conference. And I don't know why I didn't go that night, but I wasn't with him. And on the return, Jonathan reported to me that he couldn't see very well, and that the people in the car with him were quite frightened. So that was interesting to me, because I could tell it was more than just a little kind of bad night driving. There was something up. And he went to the doctor, and he came home. And it's kind of crazy, but God had prophesied this to me when I was 4 years old. And so it was February half term. It was a holiday time for the children in England. And Jonathan's mother came to stay with us, and she took him to the eye consultant. And he came home that night, and he called me and the children into the kitchen, and he told us his news. And so I wrote a poem about that, which I'd like to share with you now. It's on my website, so you can listen to it. And it's called The Wishing Well Dream. It always began, the wishing well dream, with the standing girl alone. Gilded earth, a shimmering sea, she found herself so happy to be there, looking over ripe and grey meadow grass, mirroring an auriferous sun. She never questioned her position at the well, nor even why she was there. A glistening world of long bleached straw, high as her waist, a glittering oar, like the flaxen hair on a mermaid doll, cutting a blonde swathe through evergreen seas with pinking sheer edges, pasted on turquoise blue skies. In the wishing well dream, she never wished, nor even saw behind the solid stone base, the tiled roof held up by wooden palings, the metal handle on the solid winch twisted a very fat spindle. Wound with thick rope, it dangled the traditional Jack and Jill wooden pail. But it was a real well, with a real hole in the center, and water somewhere at the bottom of it. Of this water she knew, without anyone ever speaking. A honey dust path etched a carving corridor down the meadow's center. The waving straw, beckoning and friendly, ushered the walking girl along. She loved the dream. set always in late summer, the middle season of acceptance. And she would walk confidently as if she knew exactly where she was going. Every time the girl saw the boy, at 4, at 8, 11, her heart would bloom as if the sun itself had kissed her, a sign from heaven. When they met in the dream, and she did see all his blind eyes could not, his hand stretched out and met with hers to follow in single file. Chattering children in a timeless place, walking towards the wishing well, like Ronia and Birk, Pippi and Horse, one not one without the other. When they reached the well, she always woke up, a bouquet in her heart. Mama, Mama, I've had a dream about a well, a path, and a boy. Ah, yes, she replied. I had a dream like that when I was a little girl too, of a man who was bald with a big hooked nose, holding a dark-haired newborn. I told my mama, and she went on in wisdom all about my dream the next morning. And she said to me it was a husband dream, and that I must always pray for him. Look at your bald father. See his big nose, my precious dark-haired daughter. You too must pray for this golden young man and remember the dream you've been given. Years later, returning home from the specialist, her husband tells a story of dying rods and cones and of eyes being left in a fuzzy, dark, long tunnel. In that moment, the standing girl's head spun round in a cloud of starlight gold. Remembering the dream, she poured him some water, placing it in his outstretched hand. And she did walk confidently, as if she knew exactly where they were going. So what happened was that my husband came home and he announced that he had been diagnosed with a very rare genetic eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And the reason he couldn't see at night anymore was because the rods and cones were dying and he couldn't see the differences between the light and the dark. And so began a very, very, very challenging time in our lives. And so I don't know if you have faced an unexpected shift in your life. It could be that someone died in your family. It could be the loss of a job. It could be health related. It could be emotional or relationally related. But stuff happens, doesn't it? Stuff happens, and stuff happens a lot that we cannot anticipate. It happens. So the question is, what will we do when stuff happens? And I just like to think about this stuff happening is always about breaking. It's always about a breaking. Something gets broken because there's a shift. And when something gets broken, sometimes we fall down in the breaking. So the difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough is that we get up from the breaking. Okay? So Jonathan and I were faced with this massive breaking because we lost our income, because he ran his own business and things shifted. And it launched us into a very, very traumatic time. But God was with us in the time, and we knew that he was with us, and we knew that we were in a process of being broken. And it was really at that point that any ego that I had constructed around my identity, being a composer, being a poet, was really, really broken. And it was taken off of me as you would unzip a coat. It was just dead. And it hurt. It really hurt, because if you create your identity around something, anything other than what is within you, and then that thing changes, then what's left in your identity? So not only are you facing a crisis of circumstances and position, but you're also facing an identity crisis. So it's really important to be clear about what our identity is rooted in, because stuff is going to happen and it's going to continue to happen. So it's like, how do we negotiate our way through life without falling apart and breaking down? So it was a really incredible season, because we lost everything, it felt like, at the time. And we had each other, and we had our children, and it just comes to mind about an egg and a chick hatching. I don't know if any of you have ever had little hatching eggs. And it's really beautiful how incredibly maternal a mother hen is, and how broody she gets, and how dedicated she is to sitting on those eggs. And she will sit and sit on those eggs until such a time. But what's so interesting about it is a real struggle for the chick to break out of the egg. And it requires a tremendous amount of will and energy. But that baby chick inside the egg has been hearing its mama, hearing its cluck, cluck, cluck mother's voice, so it knows something is on the other side that it must get to. So it's like when we're going through this process of feeling like everything has crashed in our world and it's dark and we're feeling anything but free, it's this hunger of what's on the other side that's going to really give us that power to get out. And you know what's so interesting? The mother hen never helps her chicks get out of those eggs. Those little chicks have got to peck the heck out of those eggs and get themselves out. But once they're out, she is all there for them. She is all there for them. So, you know, I'm not in the habit of blaming God when things go wrong, because He understands who He made and how He made me. And He's given me a pecker, right? He's given me this little tool to get my way out. And that's what's so beautiful about God's designs, is He designs everything for a purpose. And it's so perfect. It's perfect. He has already given you the tool that you need to get out of your shell. You just might not know it yet, but you've got it already. And that was what we had to do, and quick, because we didn't have time to retrain. We had 2 young children, and we had to reinvent just like that. So it was like, dig deep and feel authentic. It's like, okay, who are we? What do we already do? And I'll never forget, I have a really good friend who's a businesswoman. And I went down to her place, and I'm just like, Anna, what do I do? You know, I've got to, we need income, I need to get a job, what am I going to do? And we kind of talked through all of the options, and now I was the single driver of the family. So it wasn't like it was going to work for me to go out and get a 9-to-5 job every day, because there would be no one available to sort out the children. So I just heard God speak to me and said, Elena, you don't have to go out to the world. I will bring the world to you. And I thought, well, that's a jolly good thing, because being raised a Seventh-day Adventist, I don't know much about the world, right? So, so it was really incredible, because it's another story I won't get into, but it just came to us that what we needed to do was move out of our house, put it on the market, and that fell through, and the word of the Lord came, put it on Airbnb. So we moved out of our family home, and again, remember what I was saying about ego and identity. If you have any of your identity attached to what you own that is outside of your flesh and body, when you lose that thing, are you going to lose your identity as well? So it's just better not to attach ourselves to our cars and our houses and our clothes and our things anyway, because that stuff comes and goes, and Jesus did say it would, right? Moths and rust. It's true. So it's just like, okay, we moved out of the house and we put it on Airbnb, and the Lord started speaking to us about starting a detox retreat company. Now I'm just going to go back to the chicks for a minute. I don't know if you remember the story, but I heard this story growing up here in America, and I'll never forget it, about the hen and the chicks on the prairie. Do you remember that story, anybody? Yeah, a couple of heads? Okay, so the story goes, and I believe this to be true, that there was a farm on the prairie, and there was a fire. And the barn was saved, and the house was saved, but the land was burned all around the house and the barn. And so the farmer went out, and he was walking across the charred field, and he kicked the clump, and all the chicks ran out. So that mother hen had protected her children to the point of death. She covered them with her wings. And what does it say in Psalm 91? He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide in the shadow or in the shelter of the Almighty. So there's something about when we're going through hard times about hunkering down and just getting under the wings. And it's a very vulnerable place to be. It really is. But remember, we've chosen to be there because we used our tool to get out of the egg, to place ourselves under the hen. So when we make that choice, and it is a choice, it is a choice. We have to really, really want shift and break through and not break down and then identify with the breakdown and being broken. So how many people do you know have identified themselves with their brokenness? Okay. The thing about brokenness, it's not very attractive. It doesn't magnetize people to you. It doesn't magnetize resources to you. It doesn't magnetize anything to you. Actually, in fact, it repels. So Jonathan and I would say we're quite resilient people, and we're quite positive people. And we just kind of hunkered in and hunkered down together. And it was just one of those weird things where we'd go to church and everyone at church was like, so what's happening? And we didn't have an answer. We didn't know. And when you're in free fall, like when your life goes through a massive shift and you're in free fall, you have to really guard your energy. You have to really protect yourself. Because the thing is you need every single speck of energy you've got for what God's doing in you and in your family. So that's not the time for ministry, and that's not the time to give, and it's not the time to be justifying yourself to other people either. You know, it's like, okay, this is a season where I'm just kind of hunkering down and I'm under the wings, and that's just where I'm at. It's like, you know, how are you doing? I'm under the wings. You know, and that is a legitimate answer. I'm not doing anything. I'm just under the wings, because that's how he made us. He made us to be safe and protected under his wings. So we kind of decided that going to church for that season wasn't such a good idea, because we found that we had more faith for what God was doing in our lives than all the people around us. Okay? So we knew we were in a process. We knew that God was doing something because he says he's doing something. For I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you. What does prosper mean? It's called thrive. Plans to prosper you and not to harm. Plans to give you hope. Hope and joy and a future. And when everything kind of caves in like that, it's kind of hard to see the future. And that's when learning how to be present and in the moment is so important. And the Holy Spirit really had to teach me that, because I have a 99% human aptitude in foresight. Right? That means that I see way far ahead. And it's just like, well, when you can't see anything, that's not very helpful. But you know, I think God does that on purpose. Sometimes if you see ahead, he will reveal his plan to you, but there are also seasons when he doesn't reveal his plan. And you know what's interesting is that, you know, if you look at Abraham, he's like, okay, I'm calling you out. I've got a place for you, and here's my promise. You're going to have as descendants as proliferous as the stars in the sky. So, but he didn't tell him the sequence of steps. He didn't break it into a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. So it's like, are we going to be okay in our identity in the moment of actually not knowing what's coming next? Can we stand and strong in the moment, in the promise? Well, you know what's going to happen next? Prosperity. You know what's going to happen next? Joy. You know what's going to happen next? Hope. Why? Because he said it. And that's where we had to stand. So, through a sequence of interesting things, which is another story, I'll tell another time, Jonathan and I started the Milestone Detox, and we used our home as a residential juicing and raw food detox center. And the reason that came to us was because that was the beak that we had, okay? We had the house, we had the space, and I had grown up a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, I don't know if you know much about Seventh-day Adventists, but Adventists know a few things about health, right? So if you've read the Blue Zones book, have any of you read the Blue Zones book? Do you know about the Blue Zones? Okay, there's only one person in here. Okay, so, 2 people. Okay, so in Loma Linda, California, there's a group of people who are living to 100 years old who happen to be Seventh-day Adventists. And they're in the book. And it was a great National Geographic documentary maker, and he traveled around the world documenting all of the people groups who lived the longest on Earth. And he chose 5 of them, and he just took all of the data that he gathered, and he correlated it to see what they had in common. And so then he made this National Geographic film, the documentary about the Blue Zones, and then he wrote the book called The Blue Zones. And what's so wonderful, he's a man of great vision. His name is Dan Buettner. He is now starting Blue Zone cities in the United States. So he's going for regions now. And because he's just thought, you know, okay, if we're so clear about what the Blue Zone is, why can't we reproduce it? And he's just going for it, and he's doing it. It's so amazing. So I grew up in my childhood spending time when everybody else was out kind of hanging out at the bus stop. I was sitting in health lectures, probably given by Adina's dad, because Adina's dad's an Adventist doctor, and that's kind of what they do, is they reach out to the community in service and education through health. So in addition to that, my mother is from Colombia, South America, and she has green fingers and green organic toes. Like, that woman can grow anything, anywhere. And when I was a small child, because she just had this instinct for growing and for providing organic food for us, I have seen her grow food on concrete, on just rock hard soil. And she would go to the farmer and she would ask for his rotted black manure, hay, and then she'd put her grass clippings down and she'd put her compost on there, and she would plant on these mounded rows on concrete. So I kind of knew about whole food because that's how she had grown me up. And so then my training as a composer kicked in, and it was like, okay, so I need to make something here that's really beautiful. And I had a sound. I really believe that Father gave me a sound, and the sound is like a feeling in my business of what it was that I wanted to create. And the thing about a composer is if someone says to me, okay, Elena, we've got a full orchestra here, we've got a choir, and we've got children on the violins. Can you please write a piece of music for that? I've got to layer up every single player in that orchestra, and I've got to know what each one of them does, and then I'm writing it horizontally as well as vertically as well. So what that means is there's just a ton of detail. So I enjoy the detail. And so it was really fantastic to build a company, and it really felt like it was like my magnum opus. The biggest work I'd ever done was to build and to create this detox company. And so it was about going deep and going in to who I already was and what I already had. Very often people like to outsource themselves and their destiny to God, in the sense that they are in a position where they're saying, well, God's going to show me. God's going to bring it to me. God's going to reveal it to me. It's all out, out, out. Rather than looking in with the Holy Spirit and saying, okay, where's that beak? What's He already given me that I can use as a tool to get into the next space that He has for me? So that's kind of the background of things. I'll be talking about the history of Liebusters tomorrow, but that's my personal background. And so I started running detoxes, and in order to do a detox, everyone needed to fill out a questionnaire for legal purposes, but also because I needed to profile and know, where people were coming from and that. And I just began to spot patterns. And this kind of leads me into the next bit of what I wanted to share with you tonight, is to ask the question, what are you hungry for, and why are you hungry for that? So on the questionnaire, people would often say, okay, I'm drinking a bottle of wine a night. It's very common in England for people to be drinking a bottle of wine a night. Or I'm craving chocolate, or I'm craving sweets, or I'm craving cake. The sugar, the alcohol, the chocolate, those were the things that just kept coming through on the form. And as part of our detox center, one of the members of my orchestra is a colonic irrigation therapist. So we set up a colonic irrigation clinic on our property, and we do colonic irrigation as part of the detox program. And at the very beginning, the first therapist I had invited me in to watch a session, and the client agreed to have me in the room. So I had the opportunity to watch what comes out of someone, okay? Now, there's no difference, let me tell you, there's no difference to liebusting someone and to watching a colonic irrigation, okay? Because they're both toxic waste. and they both need to get out. So often what's coming out will be a great indicator as to what the person is hungering and craving for. Because there's this thing in our gut called the biome, which is this beautiful God-created balance of healthy bacteria with a little bit of unhealthy bacteria. We all have healthy bacteria and unhealthy bacteria. And I did mention this, I think, in the first session that we had with Gil and Adina. But what I began to see and what I saw in that first kind of picture was that it looked like champagne. It was just clear, but it was just all full of bubbles. And the colonic therapist said, well, that's fermentation in the gut. That's a candida overgrowth. So I don't know if you've ever done some research about candida, but candida is an unhealthy bacteria. But in fact, if it gets out of control and if it gets overgrown, it can morph into a parasite. And that parasite can actually bore its way through the wall of the gut and get into your bloodstream and cause all kinds of leaky gut syndrome and all that kind of stuff. So it's not a friend. It's not a friend at all. So what happens then is that if someone has an overgrowth of unhealthy bacteria in the gut, because there are so many nerves in the gut, I mean, there are as many nerves here in the gut as there are in the brain, and the two are connected. Then what happens is that the parasites begin to influence the brain and influence the organism. So we're actually talking alien takeover here. So it's actually really good news when I can tell clients, it's like, you're not pathetic, you're not weak-willed because you give in to the bar of chocolate, or because you give in to the bottle of wine, or because you give in to the box of biscuits. You're actually been taken over by an alien that's just saying, feed me, feed me. And it's just driving behavior. So the person thinks they're hungry for something that they're not. It's the alien, it's the candida, it's the parasite. So can you hear the metaphor here? Okay? So what lie busting is all about, this whole conference is called Cleanse to Connect. What happens is that if you have an overgrowth of bacteria in your gut, then that bacteria is taking most of the nutrition from whatever good food that you're eating. So you're not absorbing the nutrition that you need. So in spiritual terms, what happens is that people are hungry for God. They're hungry, they come into the worship, they're hungry for God. They want to experience and encounter His presence. But they don't realize that there's something that can build up along the gut that's called colloidal plaque. And I really hate to say this if you're an Elvis Presley fan, but Elvis Presley's gut weighed 75 pounds when he died. And he died on the toilet. Okay? And that colloidal plaque had built up. It's about that big, and it's like rubber. Because of just the buildup of not eating food with enough fiber, and that sticky stuff like, white rice, white bread, white cakes, white whatever, that stuff just flying and sticking onto the side of the gut. So what happens is that the gut was designed to continue to absorb food right to the very end. But if it's got slime, if it's got colloidal plaque stuck up against the cell wall, it can't absorb it. And the passageway for Elvis was about a pencil, they say. So out of the whole colon, he had about a pencil of passage. John Wayne was another one who died with a really with a big heavy gut. So we can want to connect, and the miraculous happens, and I know the miraculous is going to be happening here this weekend. So there is an anointing for the miraculous, and there is an anointing for grace. But we kind of, if we're in that eggshell, we need to use our pecker to get out. And it's like if the gut is just so clogged up, we need to use water and the colonic therapist to get that stuff out. And when that stuff begins to clear and get out, people feel more energized, their skin heals, their skin looks better, they're radiant, they think better, that brain fog list, that fatigue goes away, and their gut wall starts operating in the way that it was meant to, in that it's absorbing that nutrition, so they're connecting with the food that they're eating. Do you get me? Yeah. Okay? So what I would like to share with you then is the Liebusters process. Because the Liebusters process, sorry, I'm going to hook up my computer here again. If it would let me. Oh dear. It's kind of not working. Never mind. Okay, that's all right. It's very easy. It's a 5-step process. And the first thing that we do in Liebusters is we qualify the Liebustee. Okay? So Liebusters can work for anyone if they believe that they are a spiritual being. And number 2, if they're hungry for breakthrough. So I just put Liebuster session as one of the treatments on the detox menu. So you could have a colonic irrigation, you could have manual lymphatic drainage massage, you could have a facial, you can have a Liebust, you can have a aromatherapy. Okay? So I just put it on the menu. And so I just, if someone read it and they were hungry, it would activate in them. And so we began to sit down with someone, and Jonathan did the first one, and she was a lesbian Buddhist lady. And so Jonathan's like, okay, so what language would be comfortable for you? What would you feel comfortable with me using the word Jesus? What would you feel comfortable? She's like, not sure about Jesus, but Spirit of Truth felt good to her. So Jonathan Liebusted her in the name of the Spirit of Truth. And what happens, they were sitting on the sofa, she's like, Jonathan, she's like, he's come into the room. He's sitting next to me. And he's like, ooh. She's like, Jesus is here. And he's come in and he's sitting next to me. And we're like, well, he's quite grown up. He can introduce himself. So then I had a Muslim lady, a young woman, who asked me to Liebust her, and I'm like, oh, how do I do this? Because there's no cross, right? So God just showed me immediately Moses standing before the burning bush, and showed me that God's love is an all-consuming fire. So, and we've been learning, about the lake of fire. This is the place of purity and restoration and salvation. And so it's like I brought her, and she was happy for me to pray for her in the name of God. So I Liebusted her in the name of God. It's like I am ministering in the power and in the blood of Jesus, but there's no religion here. Because the thing about my business is because it was very small, I had to run the business, and I had to make enough profit to keep the business going, which bumped up all the prices and actually made it very, very expensive. So all of a sudden, I found myself working with the ultra wealthy people, the privileged people. And that's a whole wonderful other story in itself. But that's just where God parked me. So the thing about working with people like that is that if you are not authentic, or if you have an ulterior motive or an ulterior agenda, they can smell that a mile away. Man, you stink. And it's just like, I can't even carry the intention of inside of me of wanting to bring them over the line to being a Christian. I want them to encounter the presence of God, because he's big enough to introduce himself to anyone, because he knows them already. He loves them. You see, so there's nothing about religion here. It's about the goodness and the love of God for every single person. So I lie-busted, so God showed me to have her throw all her stuff into the burning bush of Moses, into the fire of God, and she got so set free. She emailed me a month later and she said, Elena, she said, my life has been totally different since that session. And then I had another girl who was, she was a Greek young woman, and she lived in Paris. And she came to the detox, and I could see there, you know, as I was checking her in, and she was introducing herself to the group, she said, well, she said, I gave birth 2 weeks ago to my cousin's baby. She said, because my cousin couldn't carry her baby, so I just thought it would be a good idea if I could do that for her. And I was just like, that's incredible. That's an incredible sacrifice, but I'm a mother, I've given birth to 2 babies, and I know what that feels like. And this girl must be hurting somewhere inside of herself. And so as I was checking her in and the Holy Spirit prompted me, I just said, you know, I do something here called lie busting, and it's like a spiritual cleansing thing, and if you're stuck or if you're hurting, it just kind of helps take care of that. And she's like, I want that. And it turned out that Jesus had way more for her than just healing her from delivering that baby and having to give it up. He had a promise and a future for her of her own family, but also he wanted to heal and restore her relationship with her own father. And again, you know, months later, she emailed me back and she's like, Elena, my life is still changed because of that. So in Liebusters, what we're always looking for is fruit. And the first thing is that it doesn't matter who it is, if they believe they're a spiritual person and if they're hungry. And so what we learn to do is we learn to really acutely observe the levels of hunger. So if a wife brings a husband in, my husband needs a liebust. How hungry do you think he is? Okay, we don't do those. But we really wait till people are really, really desperate and really hungry, because that's the power that's going to get them out of that. So then the first step is connect. We connect people. And it's a spirit-to-spirit process. And of course, you know, we are engaging through the imagination, through the intellect. But how many of you are familiar with the teaching of the spirit, the soul, and the body by Andrew Womack? Have you seen Andrew's teaching at all? Well, you might have come to the understanding of the spirit, the soul, and the body through other people. I think Derek, blessing your spirit. Yeah, Arthur Burke, thank you. Yeah, blessing your spirit. He's really good about talking about that. So that's pretty fundamental to understand in your own healing, but also if you want to be working to help others heal as well, is understanding the difference between the spirit, the soul, and the body is really important. And I would say, because of my Adventist upbringing, I wasn't taught the difference between those things, and I got into a lot of trouble because I was confusing, you know, spirit, soul. I didn't know the difference. And what's so wonderful is that when the soul and the body is hurting, we can choose to rise above with our spirit. And learning to live life and walk in the spirit is just incredible. And tomorrow morning I'm going to be talking about the Liebuster journey to oneness. And I believe that God's calling all of us now to this state of being where in fact our spirit and our soul are connected in one. Okay? But to begin with, you might have to just practice elevating your spirit over your soul so that you can begin to do work in your soul from your spirit. Because the spirit man connects to Holy Spirit and receives all the insight and revelation that you need. So my mom and dad live in southeastern Washington, and I drove 8 hours on Wednesday to get them from where they live near Walla Walla over to the west side. It's a long way. And we had a great time in the car, but Walla Walla is famous for the Walla Walla sweet onion, so you might have seen the big juicy sweet onions. But Walla Walla was the name of a tribe of Native Americans, and they have a place there called the Whitman Mission. And the Whitman Mission was this place where some white missionaries came to try to evangelize the Indians. And so you can go and visit the Whitman Mission, and it's quite tragic what happened at the Whitman Mission, because there was a massacre. But of course, history doesn't talk about the massacre that happened to the Indians before the white guys got there, so, you know, it's kind of even Steven, really. But, you know, there's this plaque that talks about how Whitman was saying to the Native Americans, we want to teach you how to read so that you can learn. And the response of the Native American was, we receive everything we know through revelation. We don't need to learn what you want to teach us. So I really believe in education, and I really believe in culture. But I think that in the Western world, we've kind of elevated it to a point where we've lost our sense of insight and revelation. And the thing is that when something's telling you one thing here, and another thing's telling you something here, what do you choose? And it's like, well, we always have to choose the peace that passes understanding. So where's the peace going to sit? Is the peace going to sit in here, or is the peace going to sit in your gut? And this is what you have to discern. And there's no prescription for this. But I'll tell you what, when you get the revelation on something, no matter what, you know. So I call that knowing in your knower. And when you know something in your knower and you act from the knowing in your knower, let me tell you, you are a powerful person. You're very powerful because you're walking in your truth. But it's not your truth. It's the truth as it was revealed to me. So guess what? I booked this trip in February because I received a celebrity birthday party invitation to Coeur d'Alene for last weekend. So I booked my trip, and I kind of felt impressed that I should book a 3-week trip. So I went ahead and I spoke to Jonathan, and it was just before Kaylee finished school, and after Nathan finished his exam, so I thought it was okay that I could unplug from the family for 3 weeks and come home. And it was really funny because I was Liebusting. We do Liebusts online over Zoom or Skype or whatever platform people have. And this lady I finished her Liebust, and she's like, do you do conferences? And I'm like, it's on my scroll. And she's like, I just see you doing conferences. And I'm like, well, whatever, thank you. And then, a couple weeks later, another lady starts prophesying over me. I see you doing conferences. I was like, well, and it's like, yeah, I've seen that on my scroll for a long time. And then finally, when the third lady did that, I was just like, oh, okay, I give in. So I just called Adina. I'm like, Adina, I give in. This is just coming, and I have to say yes. So it was so exciting for me to be here today, and I haven't felt nervous about being here and sharing with you because I was sent here. It was revealed to me to come here. So, it's like when you do stuff because your knower tells you, because your knower, he knows us, right? So the knower of all, sits in my knower, which is the gut instinct. Then I can do something. Now, I came from quite a kind of a violent, abusive childhood, unfortunately. So my instincts all got skewed. So my gut instincts were not good until I went through my healing. So that's a whole nother thing that we'll be talking more about as we move forward. But the enemy will do everything that he can to hijack our connection and our faith and our belief in our own self, in our own knower. And in our trust of knowing the knower and knowing that we know the knower and knowing when we hear from him. Okay, so in the first part of the Liebust, it's called the connect bit. That's the number one place of fear that Christians have. What is the question they ask me? What if I don't hear anything? What if I don't get anything? Okay, so if any of you have that thought or that feeling or that fear, I've just got some really good news for you. We Liebust the block. We Liebust the nothing. So it's like if I sit down to a session and it's like I connect them, and then it's like the first question is, Jesus, what do you want to set so-and-so free from? And it's like, I've just got blank. Or I just see nothing. Or I just see cloud. That's the thing we Liebust. It's so cool. Because what it means is that nobody's excluded. Nobody's left out. So then the next thing that we do is we ask the Lord to show them the root. And 9 times out of 10 in every Liebust, and we've done this so many thousand times, it's generationally rooted. So what that means is that you're dealing from a problem at an objective perspective rather than a subjective perspective. So I don't know about you, but I went through my healing in the theophostic model, which is a type of regressive therapy because I had to relive every single traumatic experience in order to get to the lie, in order to be set free. And I'll tell you what, very few people have the resilience that I do for pain. Most people will hit that pain and they will be out of there and gone. Because that's how we were made. We were made to avoid pain. So I don't believe it's God's plan that we have to re-engage and re-experience pain in order to be set free. And so what we have found is that by him taking us to the root of things, to the origin of things, the person can get set free and healed without reliving all of their own pains and traumas. And it's just, and this is a season of acceleration. This is a season where God is setting people free. And I just thank Reed for that worship. You know, that freedom. Could you feel the anointing in the room? I could feel the anointing in the room for freedom. So we're in a time of acceleration. So guess what? My ceiling is your floor. You're not going to have to go through the pain that I've had to go through in order to be set free. You're not going to have to go through the years of therapy and prayer ministry and tears in order to be set free. I'm giving it to you this weekend, you know, and you're going to be Liebusted. You know, many of you are going to be Liebusted. You're going to be receiving something that God has as a gift of grace for your life. And then if this is your calling, then you're going to be able to go and administer that, you know, to others. So once we get the list of the lies, then we ask for the truth. And it's not truth outside of myself. It's actually, we ask the question, Jesus, what does this mean? What is the significance of this revelation? Because once we get rid of all of the slime and the limes, once we kind of get rid of the colonic, once the colonic gets rid of all the stuff lining the gut, then we can bring in the truth. So what happens in a colonic irrigation is if someone has a candida overgrowth, after 3 colonics, they're usually cleaned out pretty well. So the colonic therapist can inject an 80 billion dose of healthy bacteria which is an implant right into the colon, which is the very place that the healthy bacteria need to be placed in order to thrive and recolonize, to help the colony there to build up. So, you know, Jesus told us, he instructed us, when you get something bad out, you put something good in. So it's like when you get the slime off, when you get the lies off, bring the truth in, right? And it's so wonderful because lie busting isn't prophetic, so it's not about the lie buster and what I see. It's actually about asking the questions to draw it out of the person. So then, in the early days, we didn't have the part scan as part of the lie bust. And the first fruit that God sent to my husband was an ex-convict, and we did so many hours and hours and hours of lie busting with him, but then his behavior and his psychology, like how he would manifest himself, wouldn't change. So we were just like, okay, God, you know, if you've broken off all this stuff and you set him free and the demonic has all come off of him, why can't he walk it out? Why isn't he walking it out? And so the Lord began to teach us about integration. And I could spend an hour on each part of the lie bust, and I hope that I can spend more time tomorrow. But the part scan is the part of the lie bust where we deal with the emotions and the behavior. And very often, at points of trauma and pain along the way, a person can get stuck at those points of trauma and pain. So I got stuck at the age of 12. And what would happen is that my dad would forget me. So we lived out in the country, and I would go to school in the town, and then I'd walk to the library after school, and then I'd wait for my dad. And sometimes the library closed at 6, and sometimes it closed at 9 at night, and he would never quite knew which day was which. And so very often I'd be sat on the step outside of the public library, just sat there waiting for my dad, because remember, this is the day before the mobile phone, and you know, so I was just sat there. So abandonment was a really big trigger for me, because that 12-year-old was still sat on the step waiting for her dad. So it's like, if somebody doesn't show up or somebody doesn't come through, you know, I'm triggered, and all of a sudden I'm behaving and talking and manifesting as a 12-year-old. Or I'm being controlling because I've got that 12-year-old chatter going on at the back of my head. You see what I'm saying? So what happened is, when God taught us the part scan, we began to see real shifts in ourselves and in the people that we were lie busting. So then we have the critter scan, and we really, really like to have fun with the critters, because Jesus likes to have fun with the critters. So, you know, we don't call Liebusters a deliverance ministry, but people sure get delivered of a lot. Okay? And that's because the demonic realm is usually attaching itself. It has a right to be there by all the stuff in the list that came up of lies. And once you get rid of that list of lies, you get rid of the right that they have to remain. So when it comes time for the critter scan, they're just lurking about because they just kind of want to see if you'll let them stay, but they actually don't have a right to remain anymore. Okay? So we have fun with the critters, and, you know, Jesus, you know, sometimes they'll manifest as a spider and he likes to splat them. You know, sometimes they're kind of like a ball and a bat and he likes to bat them out of the, you know. We just have a great time with the critters. You know, I love Heidi Baker. I love listening to Heidi Baker talk. And she talks about how in the morning sometimes she gets on Jesus. And you know, when you put your foot, when a toddler puts their feet on your feet, and then you grab their hands, and then you just kind of walk, and they're walking on you. So she likes to play that game with Jesus. And so when she goes for a walk with Jesus for 2 or 3 hours like that, she says she sees more miracles happening than at any other time. So one of the values, I guess you might say, of Liebusters is that we don't take things too seriously. We laugh a lot and we have a good time. So the time to have a good time and be laughing is in the face of hell, really. And so we just kind of do a little bit of kind of mopping up, cleaning up, and then we go into our favorite bit, which is the glory. So if you look at the Liebuster logo, you have a little bit of black and a whole lot of white. And so the point of the Liebust session is to get you out of the black and into the glory. And what we really like is when we get to hang out, spending kind of so much time in the glory. So earlier I was just saying, okay, so what are you hungry for? What are you hungering for? Do you have something inside of you that's pulling you towards the darkness? Or do you have something inside of you that's pulling you towards the light? Or do you experience both? Okay? So James talked about this in the book of James, he's like, how can the same tongue be speaking blessings and curses? And it's like, well, because there's some cleanup work that needs to be done. There's some alignment and some integration that needs to be done so that we are one, so that we don't get triggered into manifesting these negative things that we know we don't want to be. So it's like what happens is once we've kind of dealt with all that stuff, we take people into the glory, and what that means is we just ask a very simple question. And the question is, would you like to go and hang out with Papa? Jesus likes to take us to Papa. So you want to go and hang out with Papa? Exactly. And I've never met a person who said no. And I've done it with non-believers as well, and it's amazing. It's so wonderful. Because the thing is when you're a Liebuster, you get to see everything they're seeing. You get to experience everything that they're experiencing. So that means that we get to hang out with Papa a lot. And we get to learn about Papa a lot. And it's amazing to hang out in the throne room with Papa, because every kid is unique. So every gift that he has to give to a kid is unique. But after thousands of hours of doing it, we're kind of seeing some patterns which show us what kind of family we're dealing with here. Because Papa likes to give good gifts to his kids, and so what we see is we see people given crowns, we see them being given scepters, robes, rings, wedding dresses, all of these symbols of royalty. So the Liebuster journey I'll be talking about tomorrow is this journey from being an orphan to becoming a son, to becoming a king, and to becoming one. And so it's so exciting at that point to be with people as they step into their royalty. And I know that Gil has such an anointing for this, for teaching people how to engage in the heavenlies and then manifest that on earth. And so I'd like to close the talk here and then kind of shift into an activation, because I know that God has got something for each of you tonight, and I want to make sure that you receive it. So if you want to all stand up, Reed, would you play for us? I told you that Liebusters is all about family, and we like to broker the assets of the family business, and we each have been called to be a part of the family business, and we get to write checks on the family account. And the asset that we're brokering is love. Is love. And so what happens in the Liebust session is that we learn to love ourselves. We learn to connect and be one with Him. And then when we're connecting up there, connecting in here, then we connect this way. But I tell you, friends, we can't connect this way if we're not connected within, and if we're not connected there. So I did a Liebuster conference in Bellingham on the 23rd of June, and one of our members, Iris, came down from Canada, and she is the most beautiful, humble person, and servant heart. She goes to a little church in British Columbia, and it's called Face to Face. And her pastors felt called to come out. I think they came out from Toronto to plant this little church in British Columbia. And they've had like a vase of oil that has been continually, supernaturally refilling for a long time now. And she gave me the oil, and she said, Elena, I want to give you this oil. And I just really felt this afternoon as I was just hanging out with Papa, he's like, Elena, I've got some stuff to do with my kids tonight, and I really, really want to do it. And I'm like, yes, yes. So we've got this kind of supernatural oil here, and I would just love to anoint you with oil for the manifestation of the activation for your purpose and your destiny. And there might be some cleaning up that needs to do, but I don't want to skip out on the opportunity for the miraculous to happen. And I love this in